Welcome back to the Papers Podcast, where the number needed to listen is 1. We've searched high and low, the internets and other places, including Jason's towering stack of journals and books. If you could see the video version of it, it's about to collapse and cover him.
Stop.
Oh, it's actually gone.
Totally cleaned it up.
It's gone. It's
No,
gone.
it's behind him. It's behind him in the other chair.
You've just moved to a different place.
But what
Nonetheless-
actually happened to that towering, tilty pile of books?
Oh,
He just moved it.
Yep. I moved things around.
Well, thankfully, Jason didn't reach into his bag of tricks and find us a paper. Instead, Lara, you found us something this week. What do you have for us?
Thanks, John. I want to start our conversation today by asking y'all to help me define the term scholarship. This is a real problem for me, depending on who you are and who you read. Some people use the term research and scholarship interchangeably. Some people are adamant that they're not the same. And some people keep talking about the scholarship of teaching and learning like it's different from scholarship. So can the four of us start with just a little discussion about the word? Like, what does it mean? And just to give you all a second to think about it, to put some context around the question for our listeners, maybe I'll give you a thumbnail sketch why we need to care about this. Well, when you're teaching in a medical school or an academic teaching center, one of the defining features of your job description is that you participate in, and I quote, scholarship. You need to demonstrate scholarly excellence. So for many of our listeners, scholarship is one of the markers of success for our careers. So I'd like to ask you, Linda, Jason, John, what is scholarship?
Good question. For me, it is a rigorous approach to answering or responding to a challenge or a question that can be shared with others and will, we hope, lead to some sort of change down the road. I'm trying to put simple words on that. Having said that, I think that there are people in my milieu who think that anything that isn't done in a lab with a test tube or with a whole population of people and using all kinds of strange statistics, they don't think that is anything to do with scholarship because they do research.
Jason.
So fair enough. A lot of people in my environment would think of scholarship equals research. I think of research as a subtype of scholarship, personally. Even more simply, I think scholarship is a novel contribution to our system of understanding that can be disseminated and peer-reviewed. So that's scholarship. Now, good scholarship is that has impact. And so that's pretty simple. It's different than scholarly, which is informed by scholarship. And scholarship comes in lots of forms. So there's my little spiel. I actually did a talk on this morning for our med ed fellows here in Ottawa.
Huh.
So, Lara, you know how we love definitions and making them explicit in medical education. So thank you for doing this. And I think this is a great topic to jump in. I led a consensus conference for emergency medicine academic physicians that Linda and Jason and Glenn Regehr, who's also a friend of the show, were a part of. And so we borrowed off of Boyer and Glassick and also Elaine Van Meln, who wrote a seminal paper for the Canadian Association for Medical Education that would say scholarship is the biggest term. It's the umbrella term under which innovation and the discovery type research hangs underneath as subdomains. But what all scholarship has is that you have something original, it builds on theory or best practices, it's peer-reviewed, and then it's disseminated so that others can find it, use it, learn from it, and advance it.
I really appreciate those descriptions, and that's going to start off our conversation really well for the paper I chose today, which is entitled Defining Scholarship for Today and Tomorrow. The authors are Milner, Flott, and Thorndike, and the article is actually, I dug back a little bit. This is from 2022, and it's in the journal Continuing Education in the Health Profession, so that's JSEP. And I've entitled this paper, if you know the reference, you will sing this, Moving on Up to the East Side. Thank you.
Now you're dating yourself.
Thank you very much.
Are you wheezy in this metaphor?
Oh, I don't know, but I loved that show. Okay. In this
Can't help
paper.
but sing it too. That was stuck in my head. Now I have an earworm.
You're welcome. This is what
Thank you
I
very
bring
much.
to our show. You guys don't know, but John just did the best walk. Anyway, so in this paper, they ask, how do we define a scholarship to be consistent with historical definitions, but also align with the work of modern academic medicine. And they ask how to apply that definition within an institutional policy. And they did this at their local institution. That's the University of Massachusetts Chan School of Medicine, in order to encompass, right, all of these varieties of products. So this isn't a research paper. There aren't any methods. So we're just going to skip right over that. What I'll do, though, is
that's my problem I have with your review.
Okay.
Isn't it a case study?
Okay.
They walk through an institution's approach.
Yeah.
What they found, what happened. It's a case study. How can we walk away from a case study?
I absolutely agree with you. I hate to say it, Jason, but this is a case study.
I know. And
Very
you're supposed to be
nicely
carrying
done,
our methods with rigor. That's a bit sad. They ignored the case study. Poor authors.
John, do you want to jump on this boat or?
No, I'm going to say, is this paper actually qualify as scholarship? Is it original?
Ooh.
I'm actually asking the meta question because I think it's just rehashing what's already in the literature. So convince me that I'm wrong. Boom.
Okay. Listen, I will convince you that you're wrong.
Case study.
It's going to take me a minute, but it's okay. You grew up and waded through dial-up. You can wait for me to get through this and show you the right answer. So
moving on up.
I got to tell the listeners that Lara has that sort of body language right now with two hands held up that kind of looks like she's talking to teenage kids. Like, just calm down, people.
No, I feel finger wagged.
Well, the other thing you need to know, dear listeners, is I'm actually down in my basement because we're recording again late at night and I'm not allowed to be upstairs and keep the kids up. So I'm sitting in my basement and I'm actually talking at our ping pong table. So it's really much too high for the chair that I have. So it's my microphone's almost at my forehead. So anyway, we're having a whole
You do
night.
look like that innocent little child thing where you're trying to peek up at the adult table.
Look over the edge of the microphone to see you. Okay, so now you raise a good point about this being a case study. I do think you could frame it that way, and that would be an option. I don't know the paper itself. The submission type is called forum. And I believe within this journal that's a different kind of submission type where they have the opportunity to present different kinds of arguments and different kind of articles. So I'm going to say this is a JSEP approach to these kinds of papers. So whether or not they should have framed it as a case study, I'll leave that for the listeners to decide.
They actually use the word case study.
Moving on up, the authors point out that the debates around scholarship date back to the 1990s, which is when Boyer published his book, Scholarship Reconsidered. I totally guarantee that in the stack of books behind Jason, that book is in there somewhere. And Boyer, Linda owns it. John, do you own a copy? Of course you do.
Everybody has Boyer.
Everybody has
Classic.
Boyer. Right? In Boyer's book, he argues the point he wants to make is that we need to expand the term scholarship more broadly to reflect the work of university faculty members. And he defines scholarship in 4 broad domains. So first is discovery. And, our bench scientist research friends would call that research, right? This discovery. Yeah. Second is integration. This is about bringing constellations of data and knowledge together, much like you'd see probably, like a good example of this is a lit review, right? Integration. 3 is application. How can this knowledge be applied to help people? Boyer's really careful not to use the word service in his description. There's like a whole couple paragraphs about that. Instead, he talks about applying the faculty members' specialized knowledge, their specialized use of knowledge to specific problems. Okay, so that is application. And last we have is teaching. And what I love about the way he frames it, just small aside, is he extends the ideas about teaching. He talks about it also about inspiring the next generation and using analogies and metaphors to help bridges of understanding. Don't you love that metaphor? Bridges of understanding. I'm just going to let you enjoy that for a minute.
It's poetic. I really do struggle with the scholarship of teaching and learning in Boyer's framework because it isn't coherent with his earlier text that says disseminate, peer review. I just feel like he falls down in the teaching section, but that's just me.
And that's a really great point, Jason. And so there's a reason why we've had other manuscripts and other authors start to address this, right? So what the 4 kinds of scholarship, the other problem with some of Boyer's work is that it doesn't help us define the standards.
Yeah.
But don't worry, fear not. Here comes Glassick in 1997, and he's going to offer 6 standards for determining what counts as scholarly work. I won't list them all. It's really quite straightforward to find. One other thing to highlight here is that Boyer later added scholarship of engagement to the list. And he notes that scholarship would engage with communities and agencies outside of academia. Starts to sound like knowledge application, knowledge translation sort of things, if I were to draw a more modern alignment. Yeah, Linda.
I have also seen the term scholarship of practice. And I trying to remember where I saw it, but my sense is it's a little bit of application and a little bit of integration together.
There's a relevant series in academic medicine. I can't remember all the authors now, but it's like 20 years ago, and there's a series of like 4 or 5 papers that say, here's the many missions of academic medicine, here's how you measure it, and here are some indicators. It's old now, it's before the digital era, but I thought they were very thoughtful, and there's a great paper on how do you know if you have somebody who's a clinician demonstrating excellence.
Right.
Like
so this is when I want to take a pause and ask you all for your thoughts and reflections in terms of, now that we've had a bit of a discussion about some of the history and the literature, you've all been either sitting on promotion and tenure committees, or you've been working with faculty members who are putting together their packages. How does this idea of scholarship get applied? Does it get applied well? Is it something that our own community is wrestling with in order for our work in health professions education to be taken seriously? I'd be really interested in your thoughts. Let's go Jason, John, then Linda.
Okay. I have a really long speech about this. No. It's all about discovery in almost every institution, with a very few exceptions. But here's the good news: is it's really dynamic. So it's not just that all of us have been on committees and wrote letters. It's also that we get asked to be reviewers. And so with being a reviewer, you also get the criteria package. The vast majority of them, it's all about first author grants and pubs. And that's all they accept. That's their only metric. They still use very flawed other measures of impact like H-index and I-10. I always look at John's and try to get it to go down. But there's a few exceptions where they say, hey, we accept digital scholarship, or hey, we are all about service excellence. It just has to meet the criteria of dissemination and peer review.
I agree with Jason. I'm just not sure if the slope of the difference is as steep or is as dramatic as he's suggesting. We're getting better. Not every institution is getting better, but institutions are getting better. An example is so Jason and I worked on another consensus conference where we looked at the criteria for social media-based scholarship. And at my institution now, you track the metrics of the different types of social media that we're doing. When we started podcasting more than a decade ago, who cared? But now I get big points. I actually get paid money from my institution for the contributions I make via social media as an academic.
What the hell?
Mm-hmm. And we're also starting to see other metrics about how you can contribute in ways beyond big, massive national research grants, et cetera. Now, having said that, when you go up to P&T and you say that you have a national-based, multi-center, $1 million research grant, there we go. That's it. You don't have to write anything more. If you do other elements of scholarship, as Boyer would articulate, and as we're going to hear a bit more in a second, it takes a lot more work, a lot more explanation, and you need to have a much more inviting and open committee that's willing to hear that. There's still old guard that would say, show me the money.
I have to add to that. I think there's 2 things that are slowly changing, but where we can have some input. One is the role of the person who's coming up. It's no longer you're going from one level of professor to another level of professor. You're going as a clinical professor. You're going as a clinician teacher. You're going as an investigator. So, in fact, the criteria are now different for those different roles. The second thing is, I think there's a really important role for us as reviewers of educators who are going up, and that is to contextualize things. For instance, to say, no, it didn't get into the New England Journal, but this is the highest impact factor journal in medical education. Or, there wasn't $1 million grant, but the dollar amount of grants in health sciences education is much smaller. So this is a pretty good grant. And I must say, I'm being really distracted by people who are now wearing their silly hats while I'm trying to be serious here.
We respect what you have to say. I'm just a little flabbergasted. I just need to go back to John's getting paid for this. And I need to speak
I'm
to my
still on
agent.
that too.
Like, what the hell?
I don't know, but I think we should look into that.
I was told this is a pro bono thing, but you have to look into it.
Buddy, you can't afford a hat like this on a physician salary.
So then, moving on with our paper discussion. The second half of what I want to talk about is the second half of the paper, right, where they apply this conceptualization of scholarship at UMass Chan. And what they're doing is they talked about how the criteria for promotion and the ideas of scholarship they were getting outdated at their institution. So they started a working group to, and I quote, develop a definition of scholarship which would reflect the historical context, national standards, and diverse nature of scholarship produced by a variety of health professions faculty. They created a working group of a wide range of faculty members, and I'm talking like basic science to clinical, tenured, non-tenured, administrators, chairs of promotion committees. Like, it's a very diverse group that they put together. And they collected reflections from faculty members. They pulled on the literature. They surveyed the statements of scholarship from other schools. Nice tip of the hat there. Good idea. They found common themes and revised them iteratively within the working group to obtain consensus. So here's what they developed. They proposed that scholarship has 3 essential components. 1 is the advancement of knowledge, 2 is dissemination, and 3 is impact. Let me just tease those apart a little bit. Advancements of knowledge, right? So this is, what's interesting is they took all of Boyer's 4 domains of scholarship, put them all under that. That's one category now. Fine. For dissemination, can we talk about the list of what they are accepting as evidence of dissemination? This thing is insanely robust. The usual suspects are there, right? So peer review, journal articles, books, patents, new technologies. But so are things like expert testimony, curricula, innovations, clinical guidelines, preprints, policy statements, white papers. There's also a whole description about digital scholarship dissemination via social media. So, what a great list. Jason, you want to jump on that?
Just really, really quick. I agree that is the strength of this paper. So the antidote to John's comment about this is ho-hum and recycled is that it's all in one place, this new, longer list. I think it also includes, if I'm not mistaken, databases. If you post a database online, that meets the criteria for scholarship.
But now I just have to say, once I saw the list that there's expert testimony, I really want to do that. I have no expertise that's worthy of testimony, but if anybody ever finds themselves in a situation where they need expert testimony, I'm there. Linda, you want to do it too? Shall we start something?
No, I don't want to. I don't want to do it. I'm going to leave it to you. But I would say that every time you give us a methods consult, that is expert testimony. You're already doing it.
Linda, I love you more right now than I ever have before, and I liked you a lot before. I'm just saying. John, do you want to add a comment?
Yeah, so I started off just trying to be intentionally provocative about, is this scholarship? And I think it is, but they really buried their lead. The parts that I think are original and advanced are in 2 ways. The products which are increasingly welcome into the scope. It's not the digital pieces. It's the piece around clinical pathways or policies. Now, that doesn't mean every policy that you ever have written is innovative or advances the field. But there may be some pathways or policies or clinical elements or management or academic elements that are really innovative, but they don't highlight and pull that out. The one area they do pull out is the idea of team science. And this is the first place where I've seen that you can be awarded scholarship as long as you can very discreetly and explicitly articulate, here's my contribution, the collective team effort to produce scholarship. And I think they pulled that one out well, but that's the headline, I think, for this, which is not a review or basically a textbook chapter, the first 2/3 of the manuscript of here's where we've come from around scholarship and is just a recycling of previous ideas. The innovation, the scholarship on this paper on scholarship, if that's the meta, is the new types of article or the new types of products that are accepted, but it's lost in a box. It's not there in the main body of the text. And the idea of team science, which should have been in the headline, I think, for me.
Okay. So I agree. I think the team science addition is also really important. The other piece that I want to highlight is that they also talk about impact in a different way. And they talk about how impact, they really emphasize how it needs to be taken into consideration in terms of the context of the faculty member. So if the faculty member is in a context where public accountability is a key aspect of the mission, then that should also be a key aspect of the faculty member's impact consideration. If the faculty member is working in the area, say, of education, then evaluating something like the creation of a new curriculum, for example, should also be assessed. That should be recognized as impact, and we should look for student comments and student performance. So the revised policy is really different, and it aims at acknowledging and accommodating the increase in the ways we disseminate, the kind of impact we have, and what counts as advancement of knowledge. So, yeah, go ahead, John.
Can I just jump in?
Of course.
Just this impact word really is really important to me.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen, there's a couple of countries now that I'm aware of, Australia and the UK, that have a university impact framework. And if you go online, you can find the framework, you can find the methodology, you can find their validity evidence. And then you go to all these submissions from universities. It relates to the university's funding. And it's narratives. It's like, hey, my scholarship, my scholarly arc is this. And I did this project on water and the environment, and it led to, this, and this, and now this country uses it. That's such a cool narrative. Imagine we all did that. It actually might change the kind of publications that get released.
And I'm really interested. Yes, Linda, go ahead, please.
I've had an argument with a heated discussion with a couple of people lately about the level of scholarship. And whether, for instance, presenting at your local grand rounds is the same as presenting at an international meeting, even though you could be talking about exactly the same thing. So Jason is shaking his head. I believe, no, it's not the same thing. And so that's where I think some of the challenge comes in.
Like we have a point system like a lot of academic departments do, and it's definitely hierarchical by geography. And it's also hierarchical by some measures of impact, flawed as they are.
Yeah. John, do you want to jump in on this? Is this the way this author team presented? Is this something that's going to you'd bring to your P&T committee? Does this help? Does this change the way you think of it, or what's your experience?
I think our local environment is very receptive to this and has already adopted a number of these pieces, particularly around digital scholarship in those domains. I would expand our conversation around impact. And Lara, you and I have recently talked at a conference around DORA, the Declaration on Research Assessment, which tries to get us past very superficial metrics of impact, of citation counts, of research dollars, of impact factor, and to articulate, here is why this is important, here is how this has had an influence on the field, and here's how the field has responded to this scholarship. And it's not prescriptive. There's not a recipe or an algorithm with the DORA declaration. And you can just search DORA declaration. You'll find the references there. Rather, it's more like an argument, the kind of argument that you might make in a court of law, or the kind of argument you might make in an academic paper to frame, situate, and contextualize why your scholarship is important. And the interesting punchline of the tens of organizations to have signed this, there's not yet to be an educational organization that's endorsed this framework. And so as much as we wail against impact being biased in a negative valence towards health professions education, we're not taking up an initiative that's happening in physics and in social sciences, et cetera, and trying to reconceptualize what impact might mean to us.
Another piece of this paper that I want to make sure that we highlight. If you remember in a previous episode, I asked you all to put a pin in an idea when Linda talked about culinary medicine, and we noted that the Tulane program was a culinary medicine program that had been adopted and accepted at many different institutions. Why did we put a pin in it? Well, I wanted us to have this conversation now about the scholarship of it. Did they meet the criteria for scholarship as noted in this paper? Did they advance new knowledge? I'm going to give it a check. Yes, they did. Second, did they disseminate it? I'm going to give it a check. Yes, they did. And then the last criteria, of course, is impact. And did the paper, and I'm going to say with the podcast, because Linda, we both know with the podcast, if the gentleman had listened to it, made that paper better. So I'm going to say check. Yes, it had impact. At that point, then, I'm going to say that this scale, the way they framed it, meets its objective. It helps us to identify when people are engaging in health professions, education, scholarship, and doing it well. So there's one other piece of this paper that I want to highlight before we close. And what I want to draw attention to is the way they talk about continuing professional development work that was undertaken to make sure that the faculty at UMass were aware of the new criteria and that they could implement it. The authors describe how the Faculty Affairs Office implemented education sessions that were actual promotion packages were de-identified and then shared with the faculty members who worked together in small groups to debate the package, and they actually made decisions about whether this should be about promotion and tenure for the applicant. And this paper talks about that these educational sessions are really important because the promotion and tenure committee changes regularly, right? There's a term limits on those positions, so there's new people coming into those positions. So the faculty members writ large, like the members of the faculty, would need to be asked. Somebody's going to be asked to sit on the committee. So they need to have training and experience. And that's the thing I'm really hoping our listeners will hear today. We should all hope that members of our local promotion and tenure committees have similar training, right? Surely, no committees just nominate people based on who they know onto those committees, right? Surely the people on those committees are trained and understand the criteria, and they have the training to make the interpretations beyond just the whatever corner of the faculty they happen to live in, right? Like, I might be dripping with sarcasm here, but what are you?
Often those committees are appointed because of quotas. Like, there has to be someone from that department. It's not competency-based committees. Hopefully, they get training, though, as you say.
I have just moved institutions, so I have no idea what's going on in my own institution. But I can make comments for about so many colleagues from other places for whom I've written letters. You get requests for these letters all the time. And to look at the criteria that come on our desk from all these different institutions, and then to hear later what the decisions were, part of me is like, we're training these people, right? Like, these are the careers of people at your institution. I really, really hope that all the leaders who are listening today hear that we need those committees to be chock full of people who really understand the criteria for what is scholarship and can rattle off a reasonably defensible definition, just like you all did at the beginning of this. So that's my little rant for the day, which brings us now to our round of voting, unless anybody has some spare keys they want to share.
Yeah, I have one spare key. Don't let a geologist be on your committee. That's what happened with me when I went
kidding,
forward.
a geologist?
There's somebody from Faculty of Science and Geology was one of the committee members.
Isn't that crazy? You know, there's a beautiful paper that was written by Joanna Bates in Perspectives on Medical Education, and she talked about how the portfolios that the way they crafted, she talked about crafting portfolios for health professions education scholars was more akin to the way they would describe a professor in art, in fine art, because you have to think of it as a curation of a series of products that you brought together, that you generated. These were creative endeavors, and you have to see the meta across them. So Joanna Bates did a great piece on that. Yeah, Linda.
Yeah, so that's why we call it an education portfolio.
There you go. Well done. So then, friends, this brings us to the unfortunate moment at the end of all the podcasts where we do this hand-waving approach, where we talk about this mythic assessment
Mythic's
tool. No, mythic as in made up, as in not epic. It's just mythic.
It's mythic. It's legendary. You heard
it's
it
legendary,
first.
but for what? Scale of 1 to 5. Let's talk about methods, but we can skip right over that because it's not applicable.
No, we can't skip right over
study.
it. I am sorry, we can't. While you were rattling on about it not being a case study, I looked up
Of course you
what
did.
were the elements of a good case study
Yes, you did.
and found some, and it fits. So I think we have to do it.
All right, on a scale of 1 to 5, on methods, John, Linda, Jason.
I don't know enough about case study methodologies, so they don't articulate it well. There's probably some features here. I don't know.
You can abstain because there are no methods in the paper. I'm just saying. That's what I plan on doing.
Your Honor, bias leading the witness.
That's fine. Yeah, look at me. It's not a real scale.
Rainbow unicorn. I
There,
don't know.
that's the good vote.
It's
Don't
mythic.
you start.
Rainbow
See the corrupting
unicorn
influence?
emoji noted in the official record. Linda, please.
Oh, I thought Jason was first. But anyway, I'll
I'm
go.
sorry.
I think this is a 4 when you look at the criteria for good case studies. It fits.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. Jason.
Whoever that person is starts with J.
Well, you have JRF in your comments there, so it's got me a little messed up.
This is a 3 because they walk you through some elements of a good case study. This is about methodology, Dr. Varpio. We'll explain later.
There's no method section.
Yes, no, there is.
They just don't have a section that says methods there, so you didn't.
Well, they don't
beyond
present
that,
it as a
Lara.
study. So if they don't present
I
it as
know.
a study, should I judge them as a study?
That's why it's a 3. That's why it's a 3. They say the word, this is a case study.
So
and they talk about their methods. They talk about how they consulted, how they did a lit review, how they brought people together. I can't believe these poor authors. It's
So-
okay, authors.
I'm going to give this paper a puppy emoji because my puppy is having a nap right now, right here with us, and is very pleased with this manuscript. So she gives it 4 paws up. Now, moving on, let's talk about impact. And this is, I think, I'm really interested in your thinking about the impact of this paper. Let's go inverse order. So that's Jason, Linda, John.
So I struggle with that. I'm a little bit sympathetic to John's curmudgeonness, what he started with. And then I found like the digital scholarship section. And so there's a lot of things all in one place. So I'm going to have to give this a 4 because I taught a session this morning. I didn't have this paper handy. And I could have handed this out to our med ed fellows and said, hey, look, this is a recent take on this here and all the debates and all the key literature's here. So it has value. And so I'm going to use it as a 4.
I'm going to give it a 4 too, because I think there are those new things and it's all in one place. The only caution is handing this out to a geologist, for instance, or a rather traditional researcher, for instance. It would have to come with some sort of an interpretation so they actually get it.
We're going to get letters from the lawyers from the Geology Society after this episode. I'm just going to say.
Highly unlikely.
There's some geologists I like, you know.
Come on, Jason, they're real gems. Boom goes the dynamite.
You are on a rocky precipice.
Yeah, he's the third person. He's had more chance to think about it.
My hat's tight, so I'm rolling with what I got.
That's why I had to take mine off.
I give this a 3. I think they have some great things. I just wish they would have structured this in a slightly different way and say, hey, pay attention to the team piece, which they pull, but I would have led with that, and then look at new elements that are being added to an existing list of acceptable instruments or acceptable contributions that that meet the standard of scholarship. So a 3.
Yeah, they could have packaged it differently, don't you think? Like they buried the lead, as you say, John.
Well, I'm going to give this paper a 4 because it did several things, including start a great conversation between my 3 friends and I. And so for me, that's reason enough for any paper to get a 4. So with that then said, dear listeners, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Papers Podcast, where we dissect the literature and try to help you make sense of your day and where the scale and the rankings at the end just don't matter. Please feel free to drop us a line. You can reach us at www.thepaperspodcast. You'll find all the information you need there to get in touch with us. And so, dear friends, until next time, I'll say talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Big thanks to Samuel for all of his technical production. Big thanks to Teresa for putting up with us and continuously making us better. And take care, everybody.